So as you're putting your research team or lab together, there's a question about, of course, you want to have good people in them. So are there strategies that you can follow to hire effective people, things you can do when you're interviewing to find out who's going to be good? And to help us address those questions, have assembled a diverse panel here. Valerie Wright, in the center there, she's a lab manager in the Department of Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Metabolism in the Wexner Medical Center. Mary Fistad is the Director of Research and Psychological Services in the Division of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and she does research on youth with mood disorders. And then we have Patrick Green, who is the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Studies and a professor in the College of Veterinary Medicine, who does research into molecular pathogenesis of human T-cell leukemia, among other things. And so together they'll bring their experience in putting together research teams to help you avoid some of the pitfalls that they found and help you succeed in your research progress. So I'll hand it over to you guys.
So I'm not sure what level of hiring you all are doing, but I was thinking about kind of what I do to hire in my own lab, and we really use a vertical team approach. So we have undergraduates from the main campus, and I would say that that's a wonderful source of labor, and it's really easy to create a win-win-win kind of a situation, because undergraduates are very eager for meaningful learning experiences, and we create then a vertical team so that between the undergraduates, post-bac study coordinator, and postdocs, you've got supervision that goes up and down the team. And the postdocs, who otherwise, in my lab at least, would not be doing any other kind of university-based teaching, but might go on to a teaching position, have an opportunity to run seminars. So we run a seminar for our undergraduates. And that provides them a really great learning opportunity. It requires minimal effort on my part. I just have to hire really good postdocs who are eager to teach. So that's just kind of a win all around. The undergraduates get what they want, which is meaningful experience, and they get a recommendation at the end. The postdocs get teaching opportunities, and I get a lab that's really nicely staffed. So everybody kind of comes out ahead. And I think whenever you can look at those ways to create the win-win-win, I think that's really helpful. And I've got some other thoughts, but maybe we can turn.
So maybe I can add to that. So I think the first thing that you really need to do when particularly if you're just getting started, you need to have a vision of, and you'll see some of the reoccurring themes from Dr. Jackson's talk. So you need to have a vision of where you want to go. So even if you're just starting, where do you want to be in the next year, the next 2 years, the next 3 years? And so that will really give you an idea of where you need to start. But echoing on what was said here, so graduate students are a good form of labor. Many people sort of start there when they're just getting their lab started. And so at Ohio, we'll make this specific for Ohio State, but other universities are very similar. You need to look at the interdisciplinary programs. I mean, most of us are sort of in specific areas, colleges, departments, so you need to think about, what programs can I belong to where I can have access to different types of labor? I mean, in terms of experiences, I mean, some are more molecular, some are more biochemistry oriented, some are more translational oriented. So, seek out which programs will give you the labor force that your laboratory is interested in. So I think the other thing is when you're thinking about other types of personnel, undergraduate students, of course, is very important, and there are honors programs here at the university that you can gain access to. Other universities are similar, and I've had a number of really good experiences with honors students in my laboratory. So the next thing maybe you can think about is in terms of technical people in the laboratory. So you're thinking about what are your needs there. And again, just sort of starting out, I think it's really important to determine the amount of time that you will personally be in the laboratory yourself. So just getting started, I go back to my own experiences. I was in the laboratory a lot, so 10 hours a day practically. So my personnel were going to be, I was going to be around them all the time, so that gave you the opportunity to be there to help train them, to look at their techniques, to enhance their techniques. And so if you're going to physically be there, that allows you to start at a little bit lower entry level of the people that you bring into the laboratory. But if you're going to be there less, then you need somebody who's a little bit more experienced, so you need to think about those kinds of things when you're actually identifying the types of people that you want to hire from a technical vantage point. I'll sort of stop there and let others interject.
Well, I have to totally agree with Patrick here. I've run the gambit from having a PI who was in the lab all the time and really trained me up to the lab I'm in now, that the PI we don't want at the bench. So it is important. The other thing that I have found, and this is coming from working with PIs new to the university, is you want to find somebody, whether it's somebody you hire or somebody within your department, who on the technical level and at the bench level has experience at the university to help you find the resources you need and help you find them at low or maybe even no cost. The person that knows which vendor to go to get the best deal, the person that knows, wait, that lab has that instrument, maybe we don't have to purchase it right now. So it comes back to, again, how much time you're going to have in the lab, the technician or the person, how much experience you're going to need them to come in the door with. If you come in with undergraduates, you're going to need to do a lot of hand-holding to trust them. Graduate students, you're still going to handhold them until you trust them. They're not going to need as much. And your postdocs, you're going to expect to pretty much know what they're doing, and you're just going to guide them scientifically on the right path. And again, like I said, that comes from running the whole gambit of that.
I thought a little bit about where do you hire, and it really certainly depends upon discipline and how your particular field operates. But in my lab, when I'm looking for a study coordinator, I really look two ways. One is I have about probably a dozen undergraduates in a particular semester working in my lab. And if there's somebody who's sort of really rising to the top and functioning at that extra high level, if I've got a position coming open that spring, I've got a ready-made decision. But if not, what are the national listservs that you can advertise on? And we all have our own way of finding the right people, but I'm impressed that students who are really eager to really get that specialized training are really happy to take a couple of years post-bac and get that specialized training so that when they go on to graduate school, they're really focused on their area of interest. So I've been able to, and I think it's probably true in a lot of our fields, that we can really capitalize on students who are very planful and want to get that specialized kind of training so that they can focus. And if anything, it gets them into a stronger doctoral program when they do apply. So I think that's a useful thing. And when we think of any job, what are the three things we look at? Location, type of work, and money. And nobody takes a post-bac position, I think, for the money. If they are, they're probably really misguided. At least in my lab, they would be. So money isn't it, and location, we are where we are, and that's that. So it's really type of work, and why is it that your position in your lab will really be a wonderful stepping stone for somebody? What will they know when they exit your lab that they didn't know coming in, that it is just a fabulous career move for them to spend a couple of years with you? And unless you are really limited in your funds, I would encourage never hiring for just 1 year. Number one, it's the first 6 months, at least for me, and probably for many of us, is all training, and then the last 6 months, they're very busy departing. So if you have a 1-year position, by the time they're trained, they're departing. And they also don't know much by the time you're writing their letter of recommendation. So it's not terribly useful for them, and it's really not useful for you. So kind of a 2 to 3 year commitment, at least in my field, is a useful kind of stepping stone for somebody who's very motivated and really wants to position themselves for a higher up notch of doctoral program.
Well, and that also goes for undergraduates. If you've got an undergraduate, whether it be a work-study student or an undergraduate that you're able to pay, starting them as a sophomore where they've got a little bit of bench work is going to only get you more if you can keep them till they're a senior. By the time they're a senior, they're doing their own projects, which is, really inexpensive labor. But yet, if you've trained them well, you trust what they're doing. And they not only get the experience, they've got their name on papers, and it helps them with further their careers too.
So I'll just add, it's not only what you need out of them, it's what they need out of you. So, I mean, you really need to ask those questions when, as part of the interview process, what are their goals? And so, in many cases, undergraduate students, they want to gain research experience. Many of them have other aspirations, medical school or other things. And so, get that information right up front. I mean, the same thing with graduate students. What's their short and long-term goals? Postdocs as well. Because we're mentors, and if we're a good mentor, we want to see those people succeed, and we're not there to keep them in our laboratory forever, although it'd be great. But our goal is to get them to the next level as well.
Oftentimes, I think students believe that the answer that I would want to hear when I ask kind of what are your goals is to be just like you. And I can't imagine that that would be true. Most people look at my life and say, who would want that? You know.
Our own children.
Definitely our own children. But my goal is for the experience that they have in my lab should teach them something. They should want more of what I'm doing, or they should really want to bounce away from that, but they should all learn something from being there. They like this part of it, but not that part of it. This age group, not that age group, whatever is our particular area of focus. When I'm interviewing candidates really at any level, post-bac to postdoc, I really like them to ask me questions. What do they want to understand about the position? Because their level of insight tells me something about their thinking, something about their preparation for the interview, which speaks to how they're going to perform on the job. So that's something that's important to me, but then also just to echo and amplify what you were saying, what have you already done, and where do you want to, what do you envision? And even though I'm going to ask them, what do you envision over the next 5 years, chances are about 90% that vision will change, which is totally fine. But do they have a vision? And what is it? And do I see myself as a meaningful stepping stone from where they've been and to where they wish to go? Am I a logical stepping stone? And will they want to work really hard with me because it's to their benefit? So again, it's always trying to create that win-win. What's going to work for my study in my lab, but what's really going to be good for that person? And then when you've got a win-win, people are pretty happy to work hard.
I'll just back up a little bit in terms of when we're thinking about what kinds of staff to put in our lab, whether it's students, postdocs. I do think when you're considering that, you do need to sort of step back a little bit and figure out what the landscape is in your own environment. So some questions that you should ask are, so what kind of HR support do I have? What kind of grant support office do I have for my department? Other administrative, because that all sort of adds to what your needs are in your individual laboratory. And some of the other things are, it does come down to resources. I mean, what resources do you have to hire people? And sometimes you don't want to have the knee-jerk response where if you're just getting started and it's like, I really need a technical person, you should really look closely at that, because maybe the laboratory next to you has a technical person in the laboratory who's fairly experienced, and a lot of time these people double and triple duty. They take care of managing, ordering and things for the laboratory. And so you don't necessarily need a full-time person to get started. Maybe you can, one of the things that I've done is I had a very senior manager in my lab for a while, and people who were starting in the lab next to me, I offered them 10 or 15% of this person's time for them to get started, to order, to stock their lab. So there are different ways that you can do that, at least getting started. But eventually, you do probably need somebody full-time to sort of keep an eye on things that are going on.
Well, and I've been that person. Yeah, with the seniority that I've got, it also helps me because I see myself growing in that ability. So you want, even your senior staff, you want to be able to give them that ability to grow. Or if you're lucky enough to be in a big lab with a senior person, sharing that person, even if it's not so much the 10%, which is wonderful, if it's okay, yes, go show them how to order this. Go show them how to use the OSU system. Because learning the OSU system is just, everybody's on that learning curve. And if you've got, like he said, the lab next to you has a senior person who's able to help you help your staff, use them. And I have fun doing that, actually, because then I learn the new lab, and I get a new relationship with them, too.
One other piece in terms of hiring, certainly the CV is important, but getting the letters of reference is really, really important. People can sometimes, on interview, just be a little anxious because it's an anxiety-producing situation, and I really like to know what the long-term track record is of from whence they cometh. How did they perform in other settings? And that really helps me understand if this is the person that I want for the position.
And it's also very good to follow up many times with a phone call to those references, because there's nothing like talking to somebody in person. I mean, and because not everybody are willing to put things down on paper, but they'll tell you in a verbal conversation. And not only does that help you get information on the people, it also allows you to have better interactions with your colleagues around the nation and around the world. So, I mean, I think take advantage of that.
People have questions?
One of the quick question is, when we started lab, trying to hire a postdoc, and always you need somebody with experience and knowledge. But many times, during the interviews, we see that, the CV looks really good. There are a lot of expertise they mentioned in the CV. But in practicality, when they join the lab, they say, yeah, I ran a gel long time ago, but, it's not really what had happened. So we come into these difficulties like, did we make the right choice here? I mean, how can the PIs make sure that they are getting the right person? You're trying to put in money, effort, and everything. But again, you don't want to say after 3 or 6 months saying that, this was not the right choice you made. So can you just give some feedback on that behalf?
So one question, and it's different in every field, but supply and demand is always an important concept, and I don't know in your particular area how supply and demand work. But if you've got, if you have such a specialized kind of a lab situation that there are only a couple places in the country that would really prepare people to get to the postdoc level, then they're in the buyer's market. But this kind of goes back to how do you vet your candidate? You had the CV, you've gotten the letters, you've spoken with their graduate school advisor, you've checked up on that, you've done, if they weren't able to come for a face-to-face interview, I'd certainly recommend that if you can, but if not, I do a Webex interview to get some sense of really talking with the person in a bit more in depth. I think those are all pretty helpful steps. And maybe, if you've got certain technical requirements that you really need, spending a little more drill down time in your interview discussing precisely what their technical background is might be helpful.
Yeah, I don't think there's a perfect answer there. I mean, a lot of times it is a trial and error. I mean, you just have to do your due diligence, and sometimes, things are great, and a lot of times, you may not get what you were actually looking for, but you may get some things that you weren't expecting that are, you have to look at those as positives, on a positive side as well.
We have such a big crowd, and we do want people who are watching the video to be able to hear, so maybe if you have questions, you can come up to the mic and ask. I know it's maybe a little, not too intimidating, but here we have Emmett coming to ask questions. Line up.
Thanks for being here, you guys. So I'm definitely in the category of just starting out. So I have kind of a two-part question. I just hired a research associate who fortunately turned out to be fantastic. But the first question is, how do you find these people? I obviously advertised the job on our website, the OSU position website, and the result was about 6 applicants in 2 months. And so that's the first question is how do you find good people? How do you kind of get outside our system so that you have more people seeing the available position? And the second part of the question is, how far along do you have to be to start considering people like graduate students and postdocs? There's no way I could support a postdoc right now, but at what point in your career can you start thinking about that? Thanks.
So a couple of thoughts that I have. One is in terms of the research associate, I'm assuming that this is somebody at a post-bac kind of level?
No, bachelor's.
Bachelor, yes, right at post-baccalaureate.
Oh, post-bac, yes.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes. That sounds so much like postdoc, I understand. So somebody at the post-baccalaureate level. If you, and again, not knowing your field, in my field, something that's very effective, again, I oftentimes hire from within my own lab if I've got just the right person. This past spring, I didn't have the right person. I had lovely students, but they were going off into different areas, and none of them were really the kind of person that I would want to hire to run a study. So I posted on a couple of my own professional listservs, and this is where we all rely on the goodness of our colleagues. Just as I would pass on job opportunities to my top students, other faculty around the country do the same thing then for their students. And so I posted on a couple of professional listservs, and I got about 25 applications from around the country for people who were incredibly eager to move to Columbus, Ohio from the UC system, from the Ivies, from all around the country to have a 2 to 3 year post-bac experience that would really prep them to go on to a doctoral program. Now that may be different in other areas. In my field, that's not difficult to accomplish, but it's kind of getting the word out there nationally, as well as just saying, who happens to be living in Columbus with the right technical skill base.
Coming from my side of like I said, I'm on the staff side. The other place is word of mouth. If you've got other faculty members that might have students, make sure you're talking to them because they can then guide them your way. Other students tell other students. Any students, anybody who's been doing their research time in the lab, it may be in the lab next door to you, but if they find out that that you're actually looking for a thing, they don't realize the OSU system is out there to look at. So word of mouth is going to get you a long way too around campus.
So I'll just comment on the second part of your question about how do you decide when to do students and postdocs. Personally, I think a student as quickly as you can. I mean, I'm assuming you're in the laboratory quite a bit right now, and so the students can really take advantage of that. So, I mean, you can attract the students, and you'll be right there to help get them trained. There's nothing like being there. Things will move along at a faster pace. And so as soon as you can get integrated into some of the graduate programs around, I would start saying I have resources to attract a student. I mean, postdocs are a bit of a hit and miss. I'll just say particularly here at Ohio State. I mean, most of the postdocs sort of gravitate towards the coasts and the other big metropolitan cities. But people move for a lot of different reasons. I mean, we have a lot of faculty at Ohio State, and many of them are coming with spouses who are also scientists, and they're looking for technical positions, and they're a great resource and are highly trained. And so you just take advantage of those. And I mean, it just and some of them are coming at the postdoc level, some of them are coming at the research scientist level. So it does come down to resources and then really the ability to attract them to your lab. It's harder when you're just getting started to attract postdocs.
One trick with the graduate students is paying the tuition and fees. And so if you have a federal grant that pays the full indirects, that's great. And if you don't, then you're going to have to think through how are you going to hire a graduate student, because that makes it more painful. For example, over at Nationwide, do we have anybody from Nationwide here? Okay, yeah. So using you as an example, it just gets a little pricier. My daughter actually worked in a lab at Nationwide throughout college, and there was a wonderful graduate student, and the PI was absolutely lovely. He couldn't pay her tuition, so it's a big commitment then for a graduate student to be really working practically full-time in a lab that isn't paying your tuition. And Nationwide has an understandable policy about why they developed that, but that's the policy, and that is a bit of a rub to take graduate students. So you might have a different kind of relationship then with graduate students where they'd come over for an experience, but it won't be as intense as if you've got, unless you've got like full federal funding that'll pay the indirects, and like I said, Nationwide, that still is an issue. So that becomes a different challenge.
So I'll just comment, I mean, that's really getting down to the sort of the detail level, I mean, in terms of tuition and fees. I mean, there are different, I mean, the relationship with Nationwide is a bit different, but here at OSU, the different programs sort of do things, some of them do them differently. I mean, some of the major IGP programs, MCDB, OSBP, those our sort of the funding model currently, the college contribute to the first year funding model, and then when they come into your laboratory, then you pick up those costs. And in terms of the tuition and fees there, it really many times comes down to what college you're in. Medicine does it one way, College of Vet Med does it another way. We have some support for tuition and fees. So it's highly dependent on where your TIU is.
Okay. So we work with a lot of undergraduates in our lab, and something that we really struggle with is retaining really good undergrads. And I was wondering if you have suggestions for how we can improve that.
So one of the things that we do is to have graduated experiences. When undergrads come into our lab, you can pretty much count on their first semester, they're all going to do about the same thing. And then they're going to sift and sort based on their demonstrated competence. And the ones who function really good at that kind of entry-level work are going to keep doing that, but if they're not showing that extra spark, they're probably not going to kind of get promoted, if you will, to more intellectually stimulating tasks. And those who really are rising to the challenge, we find other opportunities for them so that it's, for them, it's a graduated experience. And if they aren't doing something a little bit new or different, or we're not offering, again, my postdocs offer a really nice seminar series, and they do a graduated, so you're not in the same seminar that repeats the content every semester. So again, that's one of those win-wins where the postdocs get an opportunity to have some elevated teaching experiences, and there's a real reason why the undergrads want to stick around for a longer period of time. But keeping somebody for, and then if you move into like an honors thesis, then you can easily justify, if they've already been in the lab for 2 years and they've had these graduated experiences and now they're doing an honors thesis, that's fantastic for them. And hopefully you're getting something meaningful out of it in the lab.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The other thing is, even if you have it as a senior staff member, sitting down and talking with that student to make sure that you're still on task with what they want. I have an undergrad right now that every once in a while we'll sit down and it's like, okay, are you getting to do what you want to do? Are we moving you in the way we want to move you? And if the answer is yes, fine. Make sure that's their true answer and they're not just giving you what you want to hear. They're undergrads, they want to keep the job. Sometimes they're just going to tell you what you want to hear. But challenge them once in a while. Mine right now, I would really like to see her come in and go do something before I ask her to do it. And she's wonderful about it when I ask her to do it. But that's the spark. Do it, making that step up and, oh, I know this needs to be done. Or, okay, I'm not doing anything today. Can I watch you do that? These are the students that you know are going to put forth that effort and you're going to be able to rise them up. If they're just sitting down and, yes, I've got to pay you, you can do your homework, well, you're not pushing yourself. So that's what you want to look for, I think, too.
So the other thing is, I think that people want to be around other people too. I mean, in terms of, if you have undergrads, you want to provide them the experiences they're looking for, but they also want to be around other people, they want to be around graduate students. They want to see that they're happy and they're progressing in their careers as well. And so if you're in somewhat of a smaller unit, a small lab where you have only a few people, that's where I think it's important for you to maybe get together with some group lab meetings or figure out some of those kind of events, because that will also introduce new relationships for those people, and as they grow, they'll say, okay, this is the type of environment that I want to be in, and that will so once they graduate, they'll say, hey, I like this environment, so they know what they're looking for then. So a small lab, it's very difficult in a small lab, and I don't want to use the term isolated, but if you just have a small unit, it's hard to attract people that if they don't see the ability to expand into a broader group.
Something else that's helpful is doing kind of end of semester evaluations where you really kind of sit down and say kind of, how's it going for you? What have you learned? What do you see as your strengths, your weaknesses? What other experiences would you like to be able to grow and develop here? And so you have that mutual discussion. And if there's kind of some issues with feedback, it's a great time to do that without like a special reprimanding meeting, because it's just standard operating procedure to have these end-of-semester kind of evaluations. One other source of staffing that I have found with no effort on my part is students kind of plop into my lap over the summer. So we have lots of students whose families live in Columbus, but they've gone off to college someplace else. And again, they're looking for summer opportunities. And over the course of one summer, it's not a position that I would hire somebody for because it's such a short period of time. But if I can turn that into a meaningful educational experience, then I offer it as we used to call it an internship, but now HR, and I see our HR person here. So we don't call them internships anymore because that's a word that has meaning in HR that we do not wish to convey. So now we call them summer volunteers. And it's really the same thing, but they are volunteering and they are getting a fabulous educational experience, and they are learning something and they are contributing to the lab. And so what I request out of those students is 20 hours a week, and we kind of pick which hours they're going to do. Most of them have to earn money someplace else, and they do that in the rest of their time. But 20 hours a week for the course of a summer is a really nice, concentrated experience. They really can learn something, and it keeps the lab staffed over the summer when we have fewer of the undergraduates doing the independent studies.
And the other option is that you may get that student back the next summer and that you already know what they know. They want something to do, they want to be able to grow, the next summer they can do that too.
And those students, again, if they're really kind of functioning at a pretty high level, which you get your mix with those students as well, but you really know who you want to bring back and give the equivalent of an honors thesis to over the course of a summer. And those are fun because you can do a real concentrated experience.
So I'll just make one comment on what she just said. So the word volunteer means something different to different people. And so to some people, volunteer means no pay. And so I think you want to be clear. I mean, that this is and this is it's because of the HR terminology, but a lot of times people are just looking for experience, and volunteer means they just want to get in the lab, they want the experience. We don't use the word volunteer if we're going to pay them.
I have one quick question for you. So say, for example, we have some students who have performed really well, and we would like to support them next year. What are the other resources? Say, for example, my grant doesn't pay for that. So what other resources I can look for to support those students?
If they're work-study eligible, always have a work-study job description out with the work-study office, because you don't have to take somebody who you don't deem qualified. But if any of your students happen to be work-study eligible, now they can be paid until their work-study limit has been reached. So that's another win-win. They get to do work-study that's really interesting to them, and you're not paying them, but they're getting paid.
I work at Nationwide. Can you just briefly, a little bit about work study? What is that exactly? I'm not familiar with what that entails.
I don't know, Kate, can work study work at Nationwide? I don't know. I'm sorry.
Fair enough.
We're just
Reason you don't
bursting
know
one
about it.
bubble after another for you. I'm sorry, Kate.
Okay.
Right. I don't know if there's some way, though, if,
I guess unless, through the Department of Pediatrics, you might be able to do it.
Yeah,
I was going to say
say
through a
if they're-
faculty appointment, there must, there, because it's,
Yeah,
faculty.
I
I
agree.
would-
If you're OSU faculty, it should work, but.
I would work with HR between the OSU and Nationwide side to figure that one out. I don't know.
Well, I want to thank our panel, and thank for the audience for your good questions, and sorry we have more time. But